welcome to the Impostor Syndrome Files. I'm Kim Menninger, and I am so grateful that you are here. It's now been more than a year since I started this podcast, and I can't tell you how much I've learned and grown from the conversations that we've had here. As you may have heard me share, I have struggled with imposter syndrome and anxiety for much of my life, so this is a very personal journey for me. I do this podcast because I want us to share our stories with each other and to stop suffering in silence. Imposter syndrome is a pretty universal human experience and nothing we should be ashamed of. By listening to or supporting this podcast, you're helping me to advance my mission of destigmatizing this conversation and making it safe for everyone to be vulnerable and get the support they need. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoy this podcast and would like to support this mission even further, please consider subscribing. And if you feel inclined to leave a 5-star review, this really does help raise the visibility of the podcast so that others can find us. And please consider sharing with your friends. Lastly, if you have a story you'd like to share, connect with me anytime. I would be happy to interview you. Thanks again for being here. Welcome, Kathy. I am so excited that you're here today. As I mentioned to you before we hit record, I have been following your work for such a long time, and I think see a lot of alignment between how we see the world and the community that we're serving. And so I am super excited to have an opportunity to chat with you one-on-one today.
Oh, thank you, Kim. I'm so thrilled to be here. And I just have to give you a hug about focusing on the imposter syndrome. It's so prevalent and so damaging. And here you are, close to 100 episodes, right? Or 80, all about it. And there's more to learn. So really, bravo to you for focusing on this. We so need it.
Thank you so much. I know you have a lot to say about this topic as well, so I can't wait to jump in. But before we get there, I'd love to hear a little bit more about you. What would you like to share with us about who you are? And then I'd love to hear your story as well.
Oh, awesome. So just as the little bio, I am now a career and leadership coach and a writer and a senior Forbes contributor and a podcast host of Finding Brave, lots of things. But my key focus now is supporting mid to high level professional women to build the career they dream of with power, with confidence, with bravery, and make the impact they want to. So that's my world and my business. And I would love to dive into the story of me, which, all right, here we go. If anyone's heard my name, they probably know this story, but quickly here, I had an 18-year corporate career. And on the outside, it was very successful. On the inside, it was not. And in fact, I talk about this a lot. I was an English major in college and I loved ideas and books and I wanted to be an editor. That's what I thought I wanted. And, at a big fiction publishing house and help authors birth their incredible ideas. I bailed on that dream like 4 weeks after graduating from college. And I took the first job that was offered and it was a marketing job in science publishing. Good grief. So, I learned a lot of things and I made so many mistakes that I leverage now in everything I do with folks. But I built an 18-year career on what I was good at, but not what I loved to do. And as I hit 40, and that's 20 years ago now, I faced a lot of bumps that turned into full-blown crises. I faced sexual harassment, gender discrimination, chronic illness. I had an infection of the trachea, of all things. Who's ever heard of it? Every 3 months for 4 years. And if anyone understands energy, what is the throat? It's the seat of who you are, your personal expression. Zero work-life balance, right? I had little kids at the time and I just wasn't in the fabric of their life. I couldn't balance it. It was a mess. But worse than all of that was waking up every day saying, is this the work I'm going to be doing in my life? This is it? Because it felt very meaningless. And I was at the very end as a vice president in a very toxic, sick culture. So the reality is back then, there weren't a lot of career coaches that there are now. I saw a career consultant and he gave me a battery of assessment tests. And he came back and said, well, the tests show you're in the right field. And I thought, I'm going to poke my eye out with a stick. What do you mean? So I didn't do anything. I didn't change because at 40, it's hard to figure out what am I going to do? How am I going to start over? What am I doing? And 1 month after moving into a bigger home, more financial responsibilities, because the senior leader at the time told me, you have a huge career here, buy the biggest house you can. And 1 month later, I was laid off. And I was crushed like you wouldn't believe. It shook everything. It shook my confidence, my self-esteem. I really was rocked. And to make a long story, not so long, I was in my therapist's office crying the week after. And he said, I know, I'll never forget it as long as I live. I know from where you sit, this is the worst crisis you ever faced. But from where I sit, it's the first moment you can choose who you want to be in the world. Now, who do you want to be? Now, if we knew that answer, we would already be doing it. And I said, I don't know. I want to be you. And we laughed and he said, what's that mean? And I said, I want to help people, not hurt people and be hurt. From that discussion, I became a marriage and family therapist, which was life-changing. And I'm so grateful for the experience and the learning. But that wasn't the ultimate destiny. Then I found coaching and then career coaching with women. So what I love to say is, I really turned my mess into a message. That was the goal in the beginning with my first book, Breakdown, Breakthrough. How can I help other people? But I really didn't know how to help other people because I hadn't really helped myself. But after 16 years of doing this, and focus. And really, I've worked with, it's thousands of women in 26 countries now in 6 continents. I've heard about everything you can imagine about what is going wrong in a career and a life. And it's very gratifying to have kind of hopefully new insights and methodologies and frameworks that walk women through what it is to change when we're scared and it's hard and we don't know how. So that's the story.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And it's interesting that you talk about that point, getting laid on. And that was really when I was working, that was around the time that I started working in high tech. It was a couple of years before that when we were riding that wave and the dot-com boom and then economy collapsed. And a lot of my friends got laid off at that time. And I remember it was a really heartbreaking experience. And so many of them said later, it was the best thing that ever happened to me because I knew for a long time, I felt like it wasn't the right place for me, but I wasn't ever going to make that decision myself. It felt like it was irresponsible. It felt too scary, but the universe intervened and,
exactly.
And went in a totally different direction.
That happened to you?
No, that happened to the people
around you.
Yes. And so I was so early in my career at that time, I didn't really have a lot of experience or a lot of context for these kinds of decisions and the experiences that other people had, but it stuck with me for forever. I'll never forget that.
Right. I mean, those are the exact words I used. And I kind of take a spiritual approach to coaching that what we humans think is the worst thing that ever happened often is the best thing that ever happened. But, we're so rocked. Where am I going to make money? I'm so scared. There's so much fear. Of course, it doesn't appear to be a good thing. I mean, if someone had told me in that moment, this is the best thing, I would have said, shut up. You don't have the challenges I have, but it was the best thing ever.
Wow. And so for women who are listening to this conversation and thinking, oh my God, that's me, right? I'm in that situation and I would love to leave, but I have this scroll of reasons why it's not the right thing or the right time, or I don't know what I want to do. What are some of the things that they can think about?
I do want to, I love this question. I want to share 5 steps that everyone should go through if they're ready for any kind of change. And I do want to say this, we're a person when we show up to our professional life. I can't stand it when I hear people trying to split apart the personal and the professional. We're the same. So, if this doesn't speak to you professionally, I'm hoping it will speak to you personally too. But quickly, there are 5 steps, but I'll give you the thing I think everyone should do. But the 5 steps are when you really want change and are stuck, step back for an empowered perspective of who you are and what you want. When we're desperate for change, we also kind of think of ourselves as a loser. How did I mess this up so badly? We forget, we humans look only at the tip of our noses. We forget how amazing we are. And everyone is amazing. I can tell you that with 100% certainty. You have gifts and talents that the world needs, but you probably don't even recognize them people. Number 2 is let go of the thinking patterns and behaviors that keep you stuck. So this is the therapist in me. What I see over and over, and I saw it, all of this that I talk about, I lived through. So there's no judgment here, but there's this thing called the pendulum effect, that the term I've coined, where you're broken down in where you are. So you want to go to the farthest ends of the earth. So I was a corporate VP. I'm going to become a therapist. And I thought there's no way that the challenges I faced as a corporate VP would reappear as a therapist. Well, I was wrong. They reappeared. Boundary problems, narcissists, partnering with a narcissist, and I'd had a lot of narcissism in my life. So we want to let go of the thinking patterns and behaviors that are co-creating problems for us, because no matter what job you have or career or field, you're going to have those again if you don't work on powering yourself up, right? The third step is say yes to your most compelling visions. I run a course, the Amazing Career Project, and it's so interesting. It's 16 weeks. Sometimes the beginning weeks, people are so scared to make a change because of money, because of obligations, that they won't even brainstorm who they could talk to or what they could consider. They're too scared to even have a conversation. Mm-hmm. So I'm saying, think of those compelling visions you have. You don't have to risk anything yet. You just have to get moving, talking about it and thinking about it. But then the next step is trying it on. And this is where I'm going to tell everybody, you can make amazing change without risking anything right now. And that is to try on the thing you say you want to do. So people say to me, I'm a corporate finance manager, but I really want to write a book. Well, writers write, speakers speak. Designers design. If you want to be a writer, you don't have to chuck your job to write. Most writers have other jobs. Start writing, write the blog, write the article, start being the person you say you want to be. So that's the step I would have everyone take now. And the final thing is, we don't make these big changes alone and in a vacuum. We need help. We need an accountability structure, and that can be truly a coach, a professional coach. It can be a mentor. It can be a coaching buddy, but we don't do these big, brave things just alone by ourselves. We need a structure for that. That was a long answer for
great. Those are really, really helpful. When I think about what you're saying, I also think about the natural tendency that many of us have to go to that's what I'd like to do, but I'm not capable, right? The self-doubt piece of, sure, I have this vision, or sure, I'd love to do this, but no one would ever hire me, or there's no way that I can ever get there. Do you have thoughts on?
I have a lot of thoughts on that. So before I go directly to that, since your podcast is the Impostor Syndrome Files, I want to talk about how imposterism shows up. Can I do that? And in addressing this. So, I've interviewed people about the imposter syndrome. In fact, a KPMG deputy chair, U.S. deputy chair, Laura Nowinski, they did a big study on imposter syndrome, and 75% of the executive women that they interviewed say they suffer from it. But they define it this way, as an inability to believe your success is deserved as a result of your hard work, and that you, in fact, possess the distinct skills and capabilities and experiences you need. Instead, their inclination is to internalize that where they got was from luck or something outside of their control, like being in the right place at the right time. I want to talk about imposter syndrome in 3 ways, and then I'll get back to your question. I think it's 3 things. Number 1, not believing you're good enough or worthy enough to do what you're doing or to dream what you're dreaming. Number 2, you have a dirty little secret that you're desperately afraid if folks find out, you're going to be humiliated, rejected, chucked out. Like, I'm too old. Like when I started my therapy training, I was 41. I was sick to my stomach the day before, the day of walking into, it was Fairfield University, thinking I'm too old, I'm going to be laughed at. And basically 80% of the class was my age. They were corporate refugees going, God, there's got to be a better way. But we have dirty little secrets, most of us, right? Where we don't think if people really knew who we really are, we'd be rejected. And the third thing is that we can't really authentically be who we are and be successful. That if we really let out who we are, what we think, what we're afraid of, we're going to be wholly unsuccessful. So this question, this issue of, yeah, I have a dream, but how could I ever make this happen? First of all, I want to tell you fact, it may be that you need more skill in this particular area. Like I wanted to be a coach or a therapist. Well, okay. Well, you got to get training. You might have a therapeutic ear. You might be a lot of people say they want to be a coach because they're good listeners. Well, that's not coaching. Coaching is a lot more than that. Sure, you've got to be a good listener, but you need a lot more than that. So if you want to, then yeah, you're going to have to get rigorously trained. But that doesn't mean you just don't deserve it. Doesn't mean you're not worthy of it. So if you have this question, but I do want to say this, I sing on the side. I'm a tennis player on the side. I rose to kind of a high level in singing. Does that mean I wanted to make a living at it? No. So what I would say is think about what you want and make sure it's truly figure out, is it a hobby that's going to enrich your life and build your confidence and creativity and make you so happy? Or is it truly a professional route? But if it's a dream that's way ahead of you, then get on the path to making that dream closer. Does that answer that question?
That does. And I love your personal story about starting something new at 40, which, we tend to think of as that's the time when everything gets harder in the career world.
And you should be making most of your money. Don't risk it and blow it and go off and do something. I mean, people said to me, my own accountant said, well, you're not going to make any money in that. I fired him.
Wow.
I fired him. I'm like, is this the kind of support network wow. But there will be naysayers. My corporate VP friends, a few of them said in fact, a lady in the grocery store, when I said I'm going to become a therapist, study therapy, people said, why do you want to do that? You don't think you have anything good enough going on in your corporate world?
Oh.
And back then, before I was a therapist, before I studied some spiritual things about letting go, before I built my boundaries, I cried when people said that. One woman over for dinner with her husband said, you're going to be burnt out and broke. I went, and she was over for dinner. And as the food was simmering, I went upstairs and went into the bathroom and burst into tears. So I will say, to do the work you dream of, you have to be more brave and more powerful.
I love that you use the word brave. I think that's such an important part of this whole conversation, because there is the internal sort of mindset piece that we're talking about, but there's also that external feedback that is very powerful. And I think that people really do spend a lot of time thinking about what are other people going to think, right? Or it's keeping up with the Joneses in the workplace, right? There's all kinds of pressure points along the way of, I'm going to disappoint my parents. I'm going to fall out of step with my peers, whatever the case may be. So
you're right about that. 100%. This latest book of mine, The Most Powerful You, I talk about it because a few years ago, I got so struck like with a thunderbolt that what is going on here, that no matter, these are mid to high level professional women around the world, no matter what field, no matter if they're making $1 million or 50,000, no matter their socioeconomic level, their education level, their role, why are they bringing the same exact challenges? And what is it that they're missing in their life that they come for help? And what do they get from the coaching we do? And the answer was they're missing bravery to address head on what is not working and take accountability to change that. But number two, that's not enough. We need power. And that's internal access to power and external access to power. So many women, and I don't mean to paint every woman with the same brush, but I've got statistics on the numbers of women that struggle. They are so afraid to reach out to help. I call it isolate. It's power gap number 3. I think 3, 4, number 4, isolating from influential support. When they're struggling, they don't think they're worthy enough to reach out to someone 10 steps ahead. And they're scared to death of it. And they don't know how to do it. And they don't know how to phrase it. But, on LinkedIn, what do I say? There's a lot of, I've got a lot of resources on that. But it's a worthiness problem. It's a worthiness problem.
You're right. You're right. And when you think about addressing that root problem of worthiness, where do you start? I mean, what's the first step?
Well, I would say this, power gap number 1 is where to start, which is not recognizing your special talents, abilities, and gifts. What I've seen is that this is so multifaceted. But first of all, I want everyone to understand you are as unique as your thumbprint. There is literally no one on the planet that has your amalgam of trials, tribulations, successes, accomplishments, perspectives, your ancestral background, the whole thing. And the world is in desperate need of what you have to offer. But first, you have to recognize what that is. And one of the problems is when things come easily to us, we don't see that it's special. Like, I was a singer. I'd love to sing on stage in front of 1,000 people. Well, people have said, I think it's ranked number 2 as the most stressful thing in the world to public speak, under, losing a spouse. But I was like, well, I kind of like it. When you are good at something and it comes easily to you, you don't really recognize that as a talent. I have this thing called a career path assessment, 11 pages of questions I wish someone had asked me. And if I'd answered them honestly, I don't think I would have made as gross errors as I had in my career. But one of them is how are you special? How do you stand out? And here's what I see about women. They're intensely reluctant to say that they're special. And that's, this is not to bash men, but we live in a patriarchal world. And we all know what that means. But feminine is pleasing, malleable, not a braggart, not someone who puts themselves in front of others. We are trained not to think like I'm special. I'm great. So the first step is to write down, and you can take my free career path assessment if it's helpful. What are the things you're most proud of that you've ever done? And I don't care if it's when you were 7, you helped an elderly woman walk across the street and it made you feel everything that you're proud of. Then dimensionalize what were the outcomes that were generated from that. Then dimensionalize what were the skills I had to do that. And if you force yourself, I guarantee you're going to begin to see how you're special. Number 2, ask people who love you, your friends, your family. Why do you have a friendship with me? Number 3, this is one of the most potent things. Get on LinkedIn in a big way. How you do LinkedIn is how you do your career. And I can look at people, and because I'm on LinkedIn constantly, I can see in 5 minutes how you're showing up in your career in ways that you don't want to be showing up. Meaning I can tell if you're engaged, if you understand how you're talented, if you know what the outcomes are that you produced. Get on LinkedIn and power that darn thing up and get your connections to 500 plus. But ask for recommendations. When you get written recommendations, I remember right after I got dumped and I got on LinkedIn, I truly thought I was the worst leader in the world in that 2-year vice presidency. And that was very painful to me because I always wanted to be an inspiring manager. I thought it was terrible because I was getting my tush kicked and I was not myself. One person wrote gratuitously a recommendation on LinkedIn, and she was not in my division. And I knew who she was, of course, but she said something like, Kathy is the person I wanted to be as a leader. And I literally cried because that recommendation healed a myriad of, painful memories. So there's work to be done, but we need to do it to recognize how that we're gifted. Everyone has a gift and many people have many gifts.
I think that's so important. And you're absolutely right about the way that we're conditioned not to see ourselves as special. And if we don't mark the moments along the way where we are special or we've leveraged our skills or we've used something unique to us to affect an outcome, then when we do get to where we are going along the way, we always feel like it's a fluke, right?
That's right. That's what builds the imposter syndrome. I had the imposter syndrome a lot in my corporate career, but one real episode of it was when I was at a book club company. I was hired as a product development manager, I think it was called. But pretty quickly on, they knew it was book clubs, it was books, and I wasn't going to be developing the products. That was the editorial staff, but I was really good at market research. So I became the research, development research manager, and then research director, and then executive director. But the reality was I loved it and I was great at it. So quantitative surveys, qualitative focus groups, presenting big reports on what we should and shouldn't get into as, directions. But internally, I always felt like an imposter because I was an English major. I never studied statistics. I never studied research methodologies. So for 8 years doing this good work, I always felt like I probably shouldn't be in this job. What a waste of time. Why was I getting those promotions and what I should have done, and everyone, I hope you're listening on this, address the dirty little secret. I was in New York. Why didn't I go to NYU and take a statistics class? They would have paid for it. Why didn't I take a few classes in research methodology? No, I kept it secret. Yeah. And part of that is we're trained not to ask. I know, in my later years, I would negotiate higher salaries. And I've even done it in very illustrious organizations where I'm a contributor or a contractor. And, the first few years, I would feel like if I ask them, they're going to just dump me. Forget it. Not only are we not giving you more, you're out. It's ridiculous. It's so ridiculous.
I know. And when we talk about it like this, which is why I talk to people about this, right? Because it really showcases the absurdity around some of this thinking. But when you're in it, you don't see it. No. It feels very real.
Very real. I remember my first class in my therapy master's, I was challenging the professor. And I didn't mean to. I raised my hand and I said, I don't quite understand this, blah, blah, blah. And she got visibly upset. I literally walked out of that class thinking I might get kicked out of the program. How ridiculous. So I told a friend, I said, listen, did I come on too strong? Like, I'm a little afraid. And she said, I think you're crazy. First of all, it was a question we were all asking ourselves, but we were afraid to ask it. And secondly, kicked out of the program. No, of course not. This is why you need other people in your corner. You cannot figure this stuff out yourself.
No, you're absolutely right. And there's something so powerful about saying it out loud and getting that kind of a reaction from somebody.
I know she laughed. She's like, oh my God. And actually, to end the story, I passed with distinction, so, but the point I think is, here's another point. I do say this and believe this. We are what our childhood taught us to be unless we unlearned it or healed it. And I was raised by a Greek mom and an Italian dad. I love them to be. Mom is 97 this month.
Oh, wow.
And survived COVID. Dad's in heaven, but lived to 93. And they were my staunchest supporters. But I grew up with mom in particular. You don't challenge. Mm. And when I was about to write this in the book, you don't challenge, authorities. And I said, Mom, I need your permission here because I'm going to say that I couldn't challenge my mother. What do you think? And there was dead silence. And then she said, yeah, I could see how you would think that. I go, oh, thank goodness. What do you mean? She said, because I'm Greek. I grew up, be seen and not heard. You don't question your authorities. You don't challenge them. Yeah. I raised you that way. Well, the problem is I grew up and I couldn't speak up for myself. Mm. So this is issue number 521 here. Boundaries. You can't have a happy career if you don't have strong boundaries. You can't catch every ball that's thrown at you. You have to know when to say, wow, there's some interesting feedback, but I'm not going to take it because it's not accurate. Or speaking up about unfairness.
That's such a great point. I think that is going to resonate with a lot of people who come from different cultural backgrounds, who have different kinds of parents with different parenting styles, and making that transition into a workplace where we are implicitly encouraged to challenge, but also receive backlash sometimes when we do, is there's a lot of mixed messages, and that gets tangled up in the messages that we were given as children. So it's no wonder that people are experiencing self-doubt and navigating.
You're so right. And, I'm interviewing a lot of people about risk taking. And, they all say now, yes, take risks. Leaders support that. Not really. Not quite yet. I mean, certain cultures do, and certain fields do. I think tech, high tech, obviously, it's all based on, innovation, which is risk. But there are cultures that say you should do it, but and risk is also speaking up to challenge outmoded beliefs and assumptions. Some cultures embrace that. Some cultures smash that down like a pancake. So, everything we say here, there's someone in the world who says, no, that's not true. I spoke up and challenge, I talk about power gap number 5, challenging mistreatment instead of acquiescing and doing nothing. But we have to be very careful how we do it. For some cultures, you can go to your boss if there's another senior person mistreating you. Some work cultures, you're going to be fired if you do that. Some cultures, you can go to the HR team. Other cultures, forget it. Sometimes you need to go to a lawyer. Sometimes, so it's not a one-size-fits-all approach, but it is. Listen, if you're being mistreated or something wrong is happening, not just to you, but you see it around you, you have to find a way to address it. And your way might be quitting.
Yes. And I think that's where the bravery piece comes in again, too, because I think a lot of times, at least it's been my experience. And like you said, we don't want to paint all women with the same brush, but generally speaking, I think women tend to feel more like they're hanging by a thread, that, one misstep and this whole thing's going to come crashing down. And so we are a lot more cautious, and we don't feel like we have as many options. If you don't see yourself as special, you feel like, oh, I'm just grateful to have a job, right? They're doing me this big favor by giving me this job. And then I feel like I don't have options. So if I speak up and I take this risk, they're going to fire me and no one else is going to have me.
That's right. That's right. And, that's why I say, I don't care where you are in your career, and I don't care how happy you are, you should be interviewing really regularly. You should be talking to recruiters. You should be going, I don't mean just to kick the tires, and waste everybody's time. I mean, for you to understand your value in the marketplace, because often when it happens, you come back and say, I could be making $30,000 more tomorrow and get out of this. But sometimes it doesn't happen that way. And you come back and you say, you know what? This is good, what I have. But if what you have is not exactly what you want, then take steps now to change that and change yourself in it. Because I always say, let's say you feel broken down, mistreated, not recognized, passed over. Quitting isn't always the answer. You can actually work to turn that around now. So I'll often say to people, look, if they come to me for coaching, let's do a 2-pronged approach. Let's get you looking at, I always say, do what you must to stay afloat, but also plant the seeds for your future self. Let's get you interviewing. Let's get that LinkedIn profile working, your resume. Let's hear you talk about yourself and get out there. But in the meantime, change what you have here. If you have a toxic boss that's mistreating you, what are we going to do about that now? Now, if it's terrible sexual harassment, you go to a lawyer immediately. And then you'll work on, what's the best exit plan here, because you could get a settlement. But the answer isn't to quit usually, because you want to be a stronger energetic match to the thing you really want. And often we have to do work on ourselves for that ever to be the case. Yeah.
That's such a great way to think about it, because I think you said this earlier too, that it's going to follow us, and not that in certain kinds of egregious behaviors, you're absolutely right. There's a difference there. But if I'm feeling taken advantage of, that's going to follow me until I learn how to set boundaries.
That's right. Or as you pointed out, until I recognize that I'm truly valuable.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need to, I don't deserve this. I don't have to settle for this.
Right. That's right. And I think it's so much, if you know you're going to leave, there's no better time to work on those skills, because you've got nothing to lose.
That's right. That's right. And you know, when you can do that and turn it around, I once had a course member who said, I want out of my job now. Why? I can't stand my boss and she can't stand me. And I said, let's dig into that. Tell me how you feel about your boss. And she said, I think she's incompetent. I said, do you think you should have her job? She said, yes. So I said that very well may be true, but everything is energy, and your boss knows you feel that. And when we know someone thinks we're incompetent, they become the enemy, because our system can't hold that, because you're a threat to me. And my amygdala goes to, it's a tiger in the cave. I want you to change how you feel about your boss. She's like, I can't. Well, she did. And it turned it around, and she got a promotion. I do not jest or exaggerate. This is how it can work.
That's really powerful.
Yeah.
My goodness. I could stay here all day talking to you, Kathy.
Me too, to you, Kim. So fun.
Final thoughts that you want to share?
So if any of this resonates, I would ask you all to remember that you are so unique and valuable. And there is no time like now where the world needs you. So if you can't believe it for yourself, believe it for who you can support, the outcomes that you care about, and this is the final piece. Happiness in a career isn't just the functional things we do. It's the people around us. Do they uplift us? Do we respect them? And it's also the outcomes that the organization supports. When you have all three of those, I love my functional work. I'm not just good at it, but it comes naturally and I enjoy it. You don't want just a career that is hard. Number two, I really learn from the people around me, and I value them. You know, in my last job, I didn't respect basically anybody there. And thirdly, I'm really proud of the outcomes that this organization supports, and thus that I support. That's what we want you to go for, and that's what you deserve. So if any of that is missing, I would definitely take these steps to power yourself up. And, my book hopefully would help the most powerful you.
Absolutely. And I wanted to ask you that too. Like I said, I've been following you, particularly your articles. And even sometimes before I'll see who wrote it, I'll just read the article and then I'll be like, oh, that's great. And then realize it was you.
Oh, that's so nice. Thank you.
How can people find the book? We'll put it in the show notes too. But for anybody who's listening right now, where can people find you if they want more?
Thank you for that. So CathyCaprino.com is my primary site. You can find everything there. FindingBrave.org is my podcast. But I also have a course based around the book. It's the digital companion to the book, The Most Powerful You. And you can find The Most Powerful You anywhere that you buy books, Amazon, anywhere. But the Most Powerful You course is mostpowerfulyou.com. So some people get a lot out of a book and they're off to the races. Other people say, I need some extra help. I need some extra training, some extra coaching. And that's the Most Powerful You, mostpowerfulyou.com.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Kathy. This has been such a great conversation and so helpful, I'm sure, to so many. So I really appreciate your taking the time to talk to me.
Thank you again for having me. I so enjoyed it.
Thanks again for listening. If you'd like to stay connected, please join the Leading Women discussion group, which meets every Thursday at 12 p.m. Eastern. This is a place where women come together to discuss questions or challenges related to leadership development and career management. It's a great place to learn from, support, and connect with other women on similar journeys. In addition to the weekly calls, we also have a Facebook group and a Slack channel where we stay connected and support each other. Please join us there too. You can check out the show notes for the links. Before we wrap up, if you like this podcast, I would love to share another podcast with you that I know you will enjoy. Do you ever find yourself playing small? Do you want to take risks, but in the end, you end up taking the safe route? Does your inner critic keep you from reaching your full potential? As counterintuitive as it often feels, we don't become confident first and then take action. It's through our actions that we build our confidence. That's why one of the greatest ways to manage imposter syndrome is by taking brave and bold action. If you want inspiration and insights to help you to take action and to be brave at work, then my friend and colleague Jen Pastikas's Brave Women at Work podcast is for you. Jen and I met when we interviewed each other for our podcasts, and I knew instantly that Jen and I shared a similar worldview and a commitment to empowering women to be our best selves. On her podcast, Jen digs into common challenges such as perfectionism, boundary setting, and burnout, all to empower us to shift our mindsets and play bigger in the workplace. You can find the Brave Women at Work podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and Spotify. Visit the show notes for the relevant links. Thanks again, and please stay in touch.